All right, 9:31 a.m. We're going to begin this work session of Lake County Board of County Commissioners focused on state legislation.
Okay,
right.
And so Elizabeth, I think you're on with us?
They're in the waiting room still.
Oh, are they?
So.
Or view, what's it, enter the waiting room?
Participants or view, I think, either way.
And then up the top there it says view.
Oh,
here we go. And then in the middle.
Cool. All right, sweet.
Right. Good morning, everybody. Hey, Elizabeth, how are you? So Elizabeth and I are here today to, I guess, present any updates. That's when I say we, it's mostly Elizabeth presenting updates since Lauren and Candace are out today. And then to have a discussion, I guess, about a couple of bills that were recently added to the list and just to get some feedback or input from our commissioners on that. So Elizabeth, I don't know if you want to unmute if you have any introductory comments you would like to make.
Sure, thank you. Thanks for letting me join. And I apologize if I repeat some stuff that maybe Lauren and Chris had said in past meetings, but just to kind of get you all up to speed a little bit. Today marks exactly 2 weeks until session ends. So we're definitely in kind of the sprint, late nights, weekends, see how things go going through. The main updates in terms of budget, the budget is finalized and it's on its way to the governor now. So now that that's been finalized, we're going to see a whole bunch of bills that have been held up in appropriations start to move through. They were able to hold off a number of cuts. It was pretty impressive that we didn't feel more pain through this budget process. There's a couple of reasons for that. One, the Joint Budget Committee decided to balance to the Office of State Planning and Budgeting forecasts instead of the Legislative Council forecast, which was more positive. It gave them a little bit more money, a little bit more wiggle room. They also removed a lot of cash funds and a lot of grants. We kept a close eye on those because we wanted to make sure they weren't grant funding that you all were receiving, HUTF funds, other things. We didn't see a whole bunch on that list that would impact Lake directly. So we stayed pretty closely engaged on that. The big cuts went to CDOT, went to the Department of Transportation. That's who kind of took the biggest hit here. The Joint Budget Committee wanted to protect K-12 education, wanted to protect higher education, and wanted to protect healthcare and provider rates. That was kind of their big focus. Obviously, you guys have an amazing advocate and Senator Kirkmeyer, former county commissioner up in Weld, who is on the Joint Budget Committee. She was very helpful to us, particularly in conversations around making sure that there was admin money for you all within the health departments, and specifically trying to go after restrictions that HCPF has been putting on your health department for things that you didn't have control over. So we did some letters on behalf of Lake County and had some positive movement. So a huge plus to her on those things. We are, even though the budget is closed, we are anticipating that we could be back in a special session over budget issues this summer or fall. Lots of rumblings at the federal level of what the Trump administration is possibly going to do around Medicaid rates and other things moving forward. If he makes cuts, that puts us out of balance here in Colorado. We'd have to come in and rebalance. There is also a concern because the Democrats are doing a number of fairly eye-grabbing bills aimed at, in their view, protecting Colorado from things that the Trump administration might put into place. But that is also catching the attention of the Trump administration, and they could withhold funds in certain areas over these policies. So some of those are the immigration bill that you all have been following and keeping an eye on, transgendered legislation that is going through the process, and big questions on if the governor signs these bills, not necessarily policy related, but potentially retribution related. And so that's kind of remaining to be seen here as we go through. starting next week, any bill that gets to the governor's desk, he has 30 days to sign. So we won't know the results of a lot of this until the end of June, when that timing comes through. So we're keeping an eye on a lot of those. I will say that the legislature is also running legislation that creates a fund.
Oh, hang tight, Elizabeth, if you can
So their
hear us.
anticipation of increased legal funds.
We missed like the last 15
Oh,
seconds,
sorry.
what you said there.
It
Oh,
froze.
I'm sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah, I'm getting the internet in this building is fantastic.
Yeah.
The legislature, the Democrats are setting aside $4 million for the attorney general in anticipation of lawsuits that they expect to be receiving from the federal government.
Oh,
Um,
so it sounds
so
like a
it's
lot of, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, it's gonna be a ride.
Yeah, like good intention, good PR, but strategy wise, it's gonna be pretty tricky. A lot of that.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. So we'll keep a close eye. Some of obviously you guys have already been updated, I'm sure, that our proactive bill, House Bill 1050 on regional jail standards, has been signed by the governor. So super excited that that is going through. And then Chris, not to overshadow, but I think we've been engaged in a number of liability centered legislation that we're wanting to make sure to be participating and protecting the county in. One is around House Bill 1152, which is tech accessibility. A couple years ago, there was a disability accessibility law that was passed in terms of putting out things. We worked with other local governments and stakeholders on legislation that would make it so that if the non-compliance was the fault of the vendor and not of your actions as a county, that you are not responsible for that obligation of fines. So excited about that. And Chris, I should probably talk to you offline because I actually unpacked a little bit more in this area with the Attorney General and Attorney General's Office and Disability Law Colorado. In terms of making sure it's clear who gets to file a claim, that you all don't need to be protecting yourself against just anyone filing a claim, but making sure that it's the person that actually has the right to file a claim because they have that disability access.
Right, yeah, thank you for that, yeah, because that was a concern to where, because we already have a number of folks throughout the state that like to kind of troll for those type of claims and then come in to file them representing these individuals instead. So it is important to make sure that it is the individual directly impacted and not these folks that are looking for a windfall by filing claims on behalf of others. So thank you for that.
Do we have any updates on the veto override for the Cora?
Yeah, so we've been engaged in counting that veto override. I will tell you, I don't think it's going great. Unfortunately, and which is really sad because this was such a well negotiated piece of legislation, and it's really mild in the protections it's offering, right? It's just an extension of a few days basically, and saying that if you get multiple requests of the same thing, you can combine them together. So the governor vetoed that. So yeah, we've been heavily engaged in that process. While the Republicans are excited about overriding a governor veto, we haven't been able to switch them on the fact that they think that this is less transparency. And it's been interesting having the conversations with the legislators about the veto override because it's kind of where the extreme right and the extreme left start to meet up. And so the very progressive Democrats and the very conservative Democrats are just not wanting to engage on this one. So we're still working in and having a vote count, and we're engaged with the sponsors, but I'm not feeling great about it. I do have a meeting with the speaker this afternoon, and that is on my list to talk to her about as well for us.
Please, gotcha. Yeah, please do. Please give Julie my regards and tell her this is a very important bill for Lake County.
Yep.
Yes, I mean, Chris just mentioned the word trolls, and that it really sums up who's responsible for a lot of our Cora requests.
Yeah.
And it costs us a lot of operational inefficiency, and even, you know, boils down to taxpayer dollars being spent on frivolous Cora requests nonstop from disgruntled people who, I don't even know what they do with them. They're obviously not reading them, because then they come right back and ask for the same or related documents all over again, and it's just infuriating, and it really slows down all the other work that we're trying to do.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate.
Totally agree. So Elizabeth, unless there are any other bills you wanted to point out specifically for the commissioners, there are two new ones that I think we wanted to touch on. The first one, this is House Bill 1271, the concerning changes to practices related to federal benefits for youth in foster care. That is disconcerting, and so for commissioners who don't have this on their radar yet, this would require, beginning July 1st of this year, that if there's a child in foster care that qualifies or is eligible to receive benefits administered by certain federal agencies, that there's an obligation for DHS to apply for those benefits. And it used to be if they got those benefits that they could use those benefits to offset some of the cost of those kids being in foster care and stuff. Well, this bill would change that to where there is no offset. It would prohibit such offsets, and instead they'd be required to create and maintain an account for those benefits for the youth for future needs even. So I can see all sorts of issues with that, not only the fact that it's going to increase the county's cost in terms of helping to support kids in foster care, but also to have that fiduciary responsibility, if you will, from my perspective, of having to maintain those accounts for those kids into the future even. So it's almost like we end up being a trustee for those funds and such, without the ability to use any of them to offset the cost of the care for the child while they're in foster care. Am I misunderstanding that, Elizabeth? That was my read on it.
Nope, that's exactly right. And so, a lot of our county partners, associations that we're linked to have taken opposed positions to this because of the impact. It's what we see a lot, where it's good intentions, but poor execution.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And that's so that I would recommend that we take an oppose on that one as well. Just because I do see it having negative impacts for Lake County. The other one has to do, oh, go ahead.
I'll just say that when 2 weeks ago with CCI, I voted against this. CCI took an opposed position because my impression when we talked about this bill last was that we were all opposed to it, even though we didn't technically take a position. We were in like a monitor position. And Laura Cruz wrote some really important reflections that completely mimic what Chris just said. And I don't think there's a single county that's for this. Intention, good, but the burden on the county is untenable.
Yeah, totally agree. The other one real quick too is the a joint, looks like the SCR 25-002. This is a resolution to submit to the registered electors of Colorado an amendment to the Colorado Constitution concerning allowing Colorado lawmakers to pass laws that permit victims of childhood sexual abuse to bring a civil claim for the sexual abuse regardless of when the sexual abuse occurred. I think this is another one where it is a very well intended bill, and I think it definitely it has the sympathies, but having it totally open-ended is disconcerting. Also, it's also retroactive, meaning that in the event that there were to be a claim lodged asserting that someone within the county had engaged in sexual abuse, it would be a waiver of the county's sovereign immunity to defend that. And in most instances, I can see where if you have someone who the allegations that the improper conduct occurred while they were a minor, with that open-ended statute of limitations, it could be 10, 20, 30 plus years later, and the likelihood of there being any relevant evidence in order for the county to be able to defend itself in these type of claims, I think would be slim to none. That the concern that I have in having defended similar cases like this is that in this day and age where we have such a litigious society, a lot of times people get crossways with someone and it's very easy to make those allegations with the intent to harm that person.
This could be used maliciously.
Exactly. And so what I would prefer to see is at least some sort of a limitation on the time period to when the claim can be raised. And the other thing I think in regards to this, I'd rather see legislation that creates more safe harbors for kids to bring forward these claims about these allegations. Elizabeth?
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in a little bit with some background on this as well. So there was legislation that was passed a couple years ago that school districts, counties, CML, and others opposed that did put into place retroactive. And the organizations sued over it and went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court sided with the local government, saying that, it is unconstitutional to have retroactive legislation and to, make us liable for those actions. And so this is actually the second year in a row that there has been an attempt to then go to the voters by a referred measure in order to change the Constitution. To Chris's point, a lot of the concern is you guys don't have employee records dating back that long. There isn't a way to actually defend against these cases. I don't feel like you all need to take a proactive position on this. We wanted to highlight for you. What I'd like is just some direction to let Senator Baisley know that we have a lot of concerns around this. Other counties haven't stuck their necks out. I don't want you all to be the only one, just from a political advice position. But this requires a 2/3 vote. So as long as all 12 Republicans hold together and vote no, which is what they did last year, then it won't move forward. And so just being able to kind of just have a casual conversation with Senator Baisley about the concerns the county has, I think would be appropriate enough, but then also not putting you guys out on an official position, just given that the list that I'm seeing that has official positions, you all would stand out, and that would be uncomfortable too.
I'm really intrigued by that concept and would love at some point to explore that whole dynamic of how, like, if we feel a certain way about something, why strategically it might not make sense to be the only person opposing something, even if everyone else kind of is and they just don't want to say it. Like, that's it's really interesting to me to hear you say that, and I wonder sort of like, oh wow, like, the dynamic behind that. I'm really curious as to like what that looks like from being in your shoes and your point of view. That's super interesting.
Well, I was gonna say, this is a super sensitive topic.
Yeah.
I mean, on so many levels. And so I would agree with Elizabeth in terms of at this point with the legislation. But if it ends up that all the Republicans don't, hold tight in their opposition, and there looks like there might be an opportunity for this to proceed and potentially, get passed, then I think I would want us to revisit it in terms of taking a position, because I think it would be a horrible result for Lake County to have that exposure for liability.
Oh my God. Can I just jump in here for a second?
Of course.
As somebody who has experienced child sexual assault, it's pretty wild to hear this conversation, to listen to this conversation. I think that one of the things that whatever position we take on this, when we take a position, it cannot be because we're afraid that people will use this in a malicious way. The amount of child abuse cases that ever come forward are minuscule compared to the amount of children who have experienced what they're bringing forward, and this fear that that assault cases can be used through like lying about it just to take someone down. Like that is the weapon of the people enacting harm. Like that is not what happens. The rare cases in which that has been proven to happen are just like not even worth making it part of the conversation, and it's really victim blaming. It really keeps victims out of the conversation and their rights out of the conversation. So however we move forward, I don't want to hear that in this room anymore, and if I do hear it, I'll be vehemently verbally against it. I can't listen to that. We've had cases in this county where where like children were sexually assaulted in our preschool, and there had been children in the past who had tried to file claims against this teacher, and the amount of teachers who were like afraid of just being blamed because kids didn't like them was like heartbreaking. That is not what happens. That is not the amount of people who like bring this actually to court. It's just wild. I can't. However we talk about this in the future, we just can't be talking like that. It's not based in data. And it keeps people from justice. So.
100% respect what you're saying, Elsa, but I've had similar experiences as you, but I've also, in my professional life, had the opposite experience in terms of defending folks against claims that were found to be baseless. And so I think that is an aspect to it. I agree with you that I wouldn't want to focus on it, and that's why I made a comment about I'd much rather us focus on finding a way to bring forward legislation that would help these victims of child sexual abuse bring their claims in appropriate timeline. You know,
sure. And
that's...
I hear that, Chris, anecdotally. I'm just saying the data does not support that. So I just don't want us to be like against a position. There'll be plenty of people against this bill because of anecdotal evidence, but not because of data. And I just don't want us to be that county when we do engage.
So, but it sounds like now we don't need to take a position or anything on it. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Yeah.
We'll keep our fingers crossed and support the Republicans, you know, in perhaps their endeavor to not have this proceed.
That also clears up what I was wondering of like why you don't want to be the county that sticks its neck out and says this isn't right, because no one's gonna the PR and optics of that look like versus what are actual concerns about the logistics. Yeah, that makes more sense to me for
It's one of the
everything.
it's one of the most sensitive and hardest topics to work on down at the Capitol, right? And honor people's lived experiences. So that's why always recommending, while there's an obligation to bring forward conversations that are happening here for you all to be aware of, also wanting to be mindful to guide you in a way that feels right for you all as commissioners as well. So that's why wanted to let you know, but don't feel like we need to be taking a position at this time.
Elizabeth, were there any of the other bills that you wanted to do an update for the commissioners on?
Those were the main ones on my list. Yeah, the core. I mean, the only other one I think we didn't chat about, but I think you all already know, is the lodging tax bill that we supported. It has gone through the system. It's at 5%, not 6%. But I'm sure you've heard some of those updates already.
Commissioners, anything else y'all wanted to chat about in the last 4 minutes for this session?
No, thank you, Elizabeth. Appreciate you.
Thank you guys. And I look forward
you.
to after session getting up and seeing you all in person. So thank you.
Amen. And getting some sleep, I'm sure.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks. So.
All right. Thank you, Elizabeth.
So we're gonna end this work session.
Alright, so,
Okay.
cool, that brings this work session of Lake County Board of County Commissioners to a close.
Cool. See you guys soon.
Alright.
Okay, thanks Elsa.
Bye.